Hey YouTube, it's Arrogant Got Jealous, and here's something for you. Have you yet heard this question before? Should creationism be taught in school? Now, you might be surprised to find that my answer is actually, sure, why not? If you want to teach creationism in school alongside the theory of evolution, that's fine with me, really. Although I do think that there should be certain rules placed in order to teach creationism, and also that regardless of whether you teach it or not, evolution should always be in the school, no questions asked. But here are a few rules to go by that I think should be followed in order to teach creationism. Rule number 1. Teach the two theories in separate classes. This is a very simple rule. What it's saying is when you teach creationism, don't teach it in the same subject or class as evolution. And what class should they be taught in, you might ask? Well, that's simple. Let's look at this. When you take classes in school, there's generally 4 main subjects that will be taught. Those subjects are often math, science, English, sometimes known as literature or language arts, and finally social studies. Now, of course, they all have varying types of science and various different types of math, but let's just go with, for social studies, the history part, and for the English class, the part that tells you lots of literature stories. And of course, for science, well, science. Now, of course, we can first off eliminate math, because that one's numbers, and last I checked, there's nothing in creationism or evolution that involves numbers. Well, except for maybe that book in the Bible called Numbers, but that's irrelevant. It's not that kind of numbers. So anyways, we have the history class, the science class, and the literature class, which I think are 3 appropriate classes to put these 2 theories in. Now, first of all, we have evolution, which, seeing as it is backed up by scientific evidence, and seeing as there is plenty of other stuff to prove it as true, that would obviously belong in science class, since that's for stuff that we don't really know is absolutely certain, but we have lots of evidence suggesting it, so it's probably true, or at least quite likely. Now, of course, the other class we could teach this in would be history, because technically it is history in some senses, but in the long run, the problem is that history has to be for stuff that we know beyond a doubt happened. Like, we know that World War II happened, although some might try to deny it, but those people are generally idiots anyways, so we know that that happened, and that's why it's taught there. Something we know happened and can prove it. Which, in truth, even though evolution, we don't really know for sure it's true, but it would be reasonable to have, like, early man be taught in history, though I would highly recommend science class for that instead. Now, of course, you wonder, where do we get to learn creationism then? And that's simple. The final class. That's in literature class. Now, the thing about literature is that in this class, the teacher reads to you lots of stories, and lots of myths even, that are basically written down in some book, but may or may not be true. We don't really know, and there's not any evidence suggesting it or not as being true or not. So I would say that as far as putting creationism in school, it would belong best in a literature class. But of course, if possible, it would even be better to have an entire separate class for religion alone. But considering the economy and public school fundings, that's probably out of question to have a class separate for that, and having it be mandatory even. So I'm gonna skip that theory, though maybe for the future it would work, but for now the idea is have it be in the literature class. And if you're wondering how can that work, it can work very well because back when I was in 6th grade, they taught me about the Greek gods. Now, of course, this is a separate theory of creationism, but an equally thought to be true theory, and an equally absurd one at that. But it was appropriate because there are lots of literature works about it and lots of stories involved, just like how the Bible has all their stories and myths. But of course, I should mention that the teacher right at the start mentioned that it's been proven that the Greek gods aren't real, and it's probably true that they aren't. Which is just like how the Bible works. And actually, that's what kind of got me wondering at first how it's possible that these guys are clearly not true, but the Judeo-Christian God is clearly true. But, oh well. So either way, you can basically teach creationism in an English class. Now, for those of you thinking, well, how about we teach evolution in the literature class and teach creationism in science? Well, that wouldn't work at all, because science is a class for stuff that is theory and has a bit of evidence to back it up, while as literature classes are for works of literature that have been written down and really may or may not be true and may or may not matter. So it's easily obvious that considering how the theory of creationism has absolutely no backing up with science, it doesn't belong anywhere near science class. And of course, evolution, well, it's not literature to say that man came from monkeys. I mean, there might be some works of fiction mocking it, but that's a whole nother story completely. In the long run, evolution is basically a science subject, while as creationism is a literature subject. So that's the first rule. Put the two classes, or subjects, in different classes. Rule number 2. Teach the other beliefs as well. How's it fair that apparently creationism gets to be taught in school, but you don't get to teach them the other theories, like the Muslim belief of Allah, or the Greek gods, or, of course, the flying spaghetti monster? And so here's my answer. If you're going to teach creationism, which of course is going to be placed in the literature class, you should also teach the other religious beliefs, like, as I've mentioned, teach them the Islam stories, and teach them about some things involving Buddha. And, of course, I guess you should also include Scientology. Well, okay, they might not allow that since they want that to be a secret. But teach that, teach some of the Mormon stuff, and, of course, we have to teach the flying spaghetti monster. So, in other words, if you're going to teach creationism, you should also teach at the same time, or in the same class, the other theories. So that way, all the beliefs get an equal chance at being possible. Because otherwise, how's it really fair that only creationism gets to be taught, while as the other beliefs that are out there don't get anything? I mean, seriously, what if it turns out that there is in fact some God up there, and there is one of the religions is correct, but it turns out that Christianity and Judaism is not the one? What if it turns out that the Greek gods really are the ones? Okay, we've proven that they aren't, but what if they are? Or what if Buddha is the correct belief? Or what if Hinduism is? Is it really fair that they don't get taught even though they're the correct answer? I don't think so. I mean, give everyone a fair chance, is what I'm saying. And of course, as I've said before, I'll make this clear. If you can only teach one other subject or theory in the class alongside creationism, my vote would have to be for the flying spaghetti monster. Because he is the only good one, as far as I can see. In all fairness, all the other god characters are pretty big jerks, just like Jealous over there. But, yeah, teach the flying spaghetti monster gospel, and, of course, teach all the other theories, but give them all a fair chance and an equal amount of teaching as creationism. That's theory number 2. Teach the other theories at an equal level to creationism. Rule number 3. Remind the students that it's just a theory or belief. This is a simple rule, really. When you're teaching the class about creationism, remind the students that this is not something that is scientific fact, and that it is really just belief that many have. The same goes for all the other belief theories. Remind the students that while as we don't have evidence, there are many who believe it as true, and in all truth it all comes down to faith or opinion. That's all there is to it, and don't go acting as though it is fact, because it really isn't. But as long as you do that, go on ahead and teach it all you want.